All right, let's continue our Bible study here in Luke chapter 2, verse 1 through 7. Luke chapter 2, verse 1 through 7. And it came to pass in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, every one to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered, and she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. All right. So he says here, and we came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. So I want to talk about a decree real fast. Let's put a pin in this. Let's go to Esther chapter 10. What we want to do is we want to see how this is nothing new, that what's going on in the time of Jesus' birth was nothing new under the sun. So here is Esther chapter 10, verse 1. And the king Ahasuerus, which is, you would probably know him as King Xerxes, and King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea. The idea here is that kings have been imposing their will and their decrees on their empires for all of time. In fact, King Xerxes had, if you go all the way to the beginning of Esther chapter 1, it tells you how many provinces and how big King Ahasuerus was. Now it came to pass in the days of King Ahasuerus, who's Ahasuerus, he had 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. So if you can imagine, from India to Ethiopia, that's present day Syria, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Egypt. So this is a massive kingdom. So King Ahasuerus has a massive empire, and he was issuing decrees way back in the time of Esther. My point for bringing this up is that there are massive empires who do decrees, and if we go to Job chapter 12, verse 23, you'll recognize that God is in charge of these empires. He's in charge of these nations. Job chapter 12, verse 23, he says, God makes nations great and destroys them. He enlarges nations and guides them. Right? So the idea is that all the nations, all the empires throughout the history of the world have been under the control of God. That their size, their scope, their conduct, all of that has been by the control of God. And so here we have a decree from Caesar Augustus. Now, if I put a pin in this Bible, which is linked in the description, and I have no affiliation with it, so I put in a link for purchase of the Bible that I'm using, but I don't get anything for it. So there's, just because there's an affiliate link there is no affiliate link is my point. Now I'm trying to find the maps, because I think there's maps in the back. Yeah, there is. Okay, good. Now I want to find the map of Jesus' ministry. I want to see if I can find. There's the Holy Land in the time of Jesus. No, okay. So we'll go to the Paul's missionary journeys, right? So this is the missionary journeys of Paul, and if I can, I'm going to take a risk by moving my camera. But if I can, and you should know this. Here you have Judea, right? Here you have Jerusalem. Jerusalem's down here. And Bethlehem is about 6 kilometers, 6 miles, whatever, outside of Jerusalem. So here you have Judea, here is Israel, and then here is Rome. Rome's all the way over here. So Augustus Caesar is here, and Augustus Caesar is issuing a decree from here that affects all of this land, all of this territory. All the people here are affected, and little Israel, Jesus, is born right out there. So this is a big kingdom. It's a big area. Let's bring this back up. Got my fancy desk. You bring this back up, and we see here that we've got this order, this decree from Augustus Caesar. Now, your history, though this is not in the Bible, but your history, you'll recognize that Caesar Augustus, He was the emperor, he was the Caesar at the height of Roman power, called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. So this would have been the most militarily successful, politically influential, place in history. This would have been the most powerful kingdom of its time, right? And it's led by Caesar Augustus. So that is when this is going out. That's the setting. That's the setting. We're talking about Christ being born, and this is the setting that a king, a Caesar, way far away in Rome, issued a decree, and that decree went out that all the world should be registered. Now, there's a couple different things here. So registered here, this idea of registered, let me bring this up. I think I got it on my, I have an app that tells me what words are. I want to say registered. This app right here says that registered actually means, in the King James, you've got a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And if you hit taxed, it'll tell you that it's apagrapho. Apagrapho. Well, this you got graph here. That's written. That's your signature. That's you're writing something. So this is to write off a copy, a pattern of something, to enter into a register of records, public records, the names of men, their property, and their income. Right. So whenever the Bible is talking here, I messed that up. When the Bible is talking here about registering, right? When it's talking about here to register, that's people putting themselves on paper. That's paper copies recording of what people own, their property, of who they are, how they're related to one another. Like, this is that person's son, and this person is from this area, and they own that house and this farm field, and they have 15 wives or whatever. Like this, you are putting on paper your existence. You're putting on paper who you are with respect to what the government cares about. Now, the King James calls this the tax. So this is the tax. This is based off the paper version of yourself. You're going to be paying taxes to Caesar. And Caesar is doing this same decree as King Ahasuerus, 1,000 years before. So this has been going on for all of mankind, that people would be putting themselves on paper, and then based on what they are understood to be on paper, that's what they're taxing. But this is a tax. Right? This is what's going on. And understand here, this is an accounting of everything of who you are, everything you own, where you're from, who you're related to. So you're not just telling people, hey, I made 15 shekels. It's, I'm related to my dad, I'm related to my brother, here's their names, here's where we're from, here's all the stuff we own. And oh, by the way, I'm in the same group as my wife that I'm betrothed to. Right? So this was basically Caesar taking stock. He's looking at all the stuff that he owns. That's what this is. He's looking at all the stuff that he owns during the Pax Romana, during the peace of Rome. So while the Pax Romana, which is the greatest time in Roman history, is going on, there's a decree that goes out that all the world should be put on paper. We want to take an account of all things. We want to put all things on paper. Put a pin in this. Let's go to Revelation chapter 20 real fast. I just want to show that there's a way that man thinks and there's a way that God thinks. Right? Revelation 20, verse 11 through 15. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which was the book of life, and the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books. People were judged, or will be judged, according to their works by the things written in the books. See, God accounts for stuff too. God accounts for all sorts of things. The sea gave up the dead who were in it, and the death and Hades delivered up to the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to their works. Not according to what you have, according to what you've done. See, there's a distinction between man and God. God owns everything, and so God cares about what it is that you do. Man does not own everything, and so man cares about what you have. And if what you have has been given to you by God, then man is incentivized. Man is incentivized to understand what you have. Man is incentivized to understand how God blesses you, but that's a different topic for another time. But this is what's going on here. This is what's going on here. Nothing new under the sun. It's a decree from a high up authority, and they're trying to get people to be understood on paper. Right? This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. Put a pin in this. Let's go to Acts chapter 5, verse 37. Acts chapter 5, verse 36 and 37. This is Gamaliel, right? So hold on a minute. Just back up real fast. Let's go to Acts chapter 5, verse 33. This is Gamaliel talking to the Pharisees when they had heard this, and this is Acts, so that you know that Jesus is risen from the grave. So they're talking about the apostles here. When they heard this, they were furious and plotted to kill them. Then one of the council stood up, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, held in respect by all people. By the way, Gamaliel was the teacher of Paul. Paul the apostle was a student of Gamaliel, so this is that teacher. And commanded them to put the apostles outside for a little while. And he said to them, Men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what you intend to do regarding these men. For some time ago, Theudas rose up, claiming to be somebody. Now, here's the deal. In 36, we're talking about Gamaliel's talking about Theudas. Theudas rose up claiming to be somebody. A number of men, about 400, joined him. He was slain, and all who obeyed him were scattered and come to nothing. After this man, Judas of Galilee, rose up in these days of the census and drew away many people after him, who also perished. And all who obeyed him were dispersed. And now I say to you, keep away from these men and let them alone. For if it is the plan of this work of men, it will come to nothing. But if it is of God, you cannot overthrow it, lest you be even found to fight against God. Gamaliel's point is that the Jews want to kill the apostles because the apostles are doing miracles and they're preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the gospel of Jesus Christ is destroying their way of life because it's the truth and it's the way that all people are reconciled to God. So while this is going on, Gamaliel tells the Jews, hey guys, there's a guy who rose up. He claimed to be somebody important. People joined him. He was killed. They scattered once he was killed. This is where you strike the shepherd, this flock will scatter. Right? So then there was another guy, Judas of Galilee, rose up in the days of the census and drew away from many people after him. So people don't like their stuff to be known. They don't like to be registered. They don't like to be taxed. And so there was this notion back in the day of Judas of Galilee and Theudas of rising up and militarily fighting back. This was also done for the Maccabees in the sense that the Israelite nation rose up against their oppressors at the time and they won their freedom. And so this notion of rising up and fighting is what Gamaliel likens the apostles to. Of course, he's wrong because they're about the gospel and the kingdom of heaven, amen. But this is the idea. And so what I wanted to do here was to show that there's a census and to show that Israel, specifically there in Jerusalem, was a place of incredible turmoil. In fact, if you go to Luke chapter 21, let me just jot here to Luke 21, I think it is. Because you got Gamaliel talking about all sorts of people rising up and fighting back. And I didn't mark it, which is why it's taken so long. But here we go, Luke 21, Jesus is saying, so they asked him, saying, Teacher, but what will these things be, and what the sign will there be when these things are about to take place? And he said, Take heed that you not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time has drawn near. Therefore do not go after them. Now the he here is the Messiah, claiming to be the king, claiming to be the one that's going to lead the Israelite nation. And so Jesus is saying there's going to be many people coming in his name saying that they are the Messiah. Let's go Israel, let's rise up and fight. Therefore, do not go after them. Right? So here is, one, Jesus is saying there's going to be other people that come in his name, that try to take the position, that try to to be the king of Israel, that try to fill the role that the Israelites are looking for Jesus to fill. And Jesus is saying that the time has drawn near. Or they will say the time has drawn near. Therefore, do not go after them. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass, but the end will not come immediately. Now, there's a lot more here, and we'll get to that when we get to Luke 21. But this is just recognizing, this is Jesus teaching that when he goes, when he's leaving, deception's going to be the thing, and it's going to be predicated on people claiming to be Christ, claiming to be the Messiah, claiming to have the knowledge that he has, or claiming to take rise to the throne, or anything else. And Jesus is saying, don't go after them. right? So this is fundamentally different than what Gamaliel is saying. Gamaliel says, hey, you strike the shepherd, they'll scatter. So I just wanted to point out that was there's a census during Quirinius that was governed in Syria that people fought back against. So all went to be registered, everyone to their own city. So the entire world, as it was understood by Caesar Augustus, the whole world went to go get registered, went to go get taxed. Everyone to his own city. Now I want to put a pin in that, and let's go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 5. Genesis chapter 10, verse 5. This is the very first time in the Bible that the word nations is used. Genesis chapter 10, verse 5. From these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So here you have people are separating themselves into their land, according to their language, and according to their families. The three components of a nation are land, the physical land you live on, the language, the words that you speak, the ways to communicate, and your families, who you're related to. And so here you have in the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, people are going back to their land. No, that's Micah. That's the wrong thing. Here we go. They're going back to their land. Everyone to his own city, right? So everyone is going back to their place of origin according to who they're registered with. See, the government understands people on paper. The government doesn't know people. And so for the government to issue the decree that the whole world has to be taxed and registered, people have to go align with what's on paper. This is why everyone goes back to their own city. So when Joseph is going back to Bethlehem, right? Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, the city of Bethlehem. Think about this. This is saying that Joseph went up from Galilee, where he currently lived, right? The region he lived, the city of Nazareth, which is where he lived, into Judea, a different province, to the city of David. Why? Which is called Bethlehem, because he, Joseph, was of the house of lineage of David. Do you not understand how the registration, the taxing of the government is according to the paper that you're understood by? This is why governments register people. This is why they need to know and want to know who you are. And this is why back in the day, Joseph has to go to Bethlehem, right? He has to go to Bethlehem because he's of the lineage of David. Now put a pin in this and let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 16. 1 Samuel chapter 16, and we're just going to do verse 1. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1. Here's 1 Samuel 16, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Bethlehemite, that's someone who's from Bethlehem. For I have provided myself, for God has provided himself, a king among his sons. Now, of course, this is talking about the fact that David is going to be anointed as king. But Bethlehem is where Jesse's from. Jesse is the father of David, so David is from Bethlehem. Joseph is of the line of Bethlehem. Let's fast forward to Micah chapter 5, verse 2. Micah chapter 5, verse 2 is down here. We get but you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth are from old, from everlasting. So this is Micah's prophecy that the Messiah will be from Bethlehem. So you have here, don't miss this, don't miss what God is doing. See, Job 12:23 says God raises nations up and he crushes them. They rise and they fall by him. Here you have Rome, the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, sending out a decree in order to the known world that everyone should go register on paper, go be taxed. Right? This census causes fights. This is causing all sorts of ruckus, but it's making everyone go back to their origins, go back to their lineage. Joseph, being from the city of David, is called Bethlehem. He goes back to Bethlehem, even though he's from Nazareth. So he goes from the northern area, and let's see if we can find this on the map. That way you can understand it. Let's go all the way back here to the back. See it on the maps. We want to look at the Jesus ministry, right? And we want to go Jesus ministry. Where are you at? Here's Galilee, Bethsaida. Nazareth. Here we go. Nazareth. There's Nazareth, right? And so then you travel all the way down here past Samaria to Judea. You go through Jericho, you come to Jerusalem, and then Bethlehem. Bethlehem's on the south side of Jerusalem. Now remember, Jesus was teaching that these mountains, right, that the mountain region here in Jericho, this was the robber. The Good Samaritan happened in Samaria. So this is where all the robbers are. So you've got a guy who's coming from Nazareth with a pregnant wife down this road right here through the mountains where people can get robbed, all the way down here to Bethlehem so that they can obey the decree from half a world away, so that they can get on the right papers. Don't you see that complying with the government and whatnot is putting themselves in the position where all this stuff is being set up? And so, Joseph left Galilee, northern Israel, to the city of Nazareth, or he's coming out of Nazareth, northern Israel, to the province of Judea, which is around Jerusalem, to the city of David, which is Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife. Now think about this. His betrothed wife who was with child. Now, if you can't consummate the marriage until it is a marriage, until you are married, why is she pregnant? See, Luke is putting in here the fact that Mary is betrothed. She's a betrothed wife. She's not his wife, right? If she was his wife and they were doing what man and women do, then there would be no betrothal here. It would just be his wife. It also signifies that if you are betrothed, then you are considered loyal from an adultery perspective, in the sense that you don't go have sex with anybody else. But his betrothed wife, well, if these are good Jews, they're not supposed to be consummating the relationship. But she was pregnant. She was with child. She was with child even though she was betrothed, and they haven't yet consummated the marriage. So this talks about a virgin bride is pregnant, and she's not married yet, and she's going with Joseph from Nazareth to Bethlehem, just like Micah chapter 5 verse 2 says. Without the decree from Caesar, get this, without the decree from Caesar that all the world should be registered to be taxed, and this means that people are going to be understood on paper, Joseph is up here in Nazareth. Well, Joseph has to go from Nazareth up to the north down to Bethlehem, because that's where he's from, just like Micah chapter 5 verse 2 said would happen. And now she's with child, so it was that her time was there, that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. Now, I don't know if people back in the day could say, you know what, I'm pretty close to delivering my baby. I don't need to be going from Nazareth through the hills of Samaria and the town of Jericho, the place where people get robbed. I don't know if I need to go all the way down there just to sign a piece of paper. But she did. She traveled, piece of paper, and how many people when they're pregnant are told, don't travel within this window because it's, you need to be close to your hospital or whatever. And so here you have a betrothed wife. This is culturally bad because they're not supposed to have had sex, but yet here she is, she's pregnant, and they're traveling through a dangerous area, and that's the time whenever she's going to be completing her delivery. I mean, you see how God is just stacking everything up? He's stacking up the most powerful power in the world at the time, the Pax Romana, Caesar Augustus, ordering a decree to people to be registered, to put on paper, to be taxed. And this census is going all over the place. And so they have to go each one to their own city. And she brought forth her firstborn son. Why? Because she's a virgin. She's never had a kid before. She's never had sex. And wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. There was no room for them in the inn because people had to go back to their city. And so everyone was traveling. Everything was a hubbub. And if you can imagine, if Mary is traveling with Joseph as a betrothed wife, who else from the lineage of David, and how many people was he related to? The lineage of David, the small town of Bethlehem would have swelled in size because people were coming from outside of Bethlehem to Bethlehem. I don't know how many else were wrapped, but this suggests that all of these other people got to Bethlehem and they took up all the rooms before they did. And, amen, maybe this is the first time that the Bible's teaching that this is why women are slow to travel or prep or whatnot, but this is definitely suggesting that they didn't get there quick. They didn't, that was a joke, by the way. They didn't pack this stuff up real fast, and so they're traveling slow, they're traveling a far distance, and so the population has swelled here. And the Bible says, here she is, she brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, right? Because he's a baby. Why do you wrap a baby in swaddling clothes? Because they're cold, because they need care, because they're vulnerable, because they're not, King of Kings and Lord of Lords and commanding angel armies, right? Because they're little babies. They're little babies, and she laid him, Christ, in a manger. This is a place that you'd put an animal. This is not a bed. This is not a crib. This is not one of those automatic swinging things. This is a place where you put an animal. And if they're in a manger, if they're in a barn, if they're in the side of a rock face, whatever it looks like, there's probably poop in there, and there's bleeding of sheep. And here you have this virgin who's never had sex is giving childbirth. She's never had sex. And Joseph, who hasn't consummated the marriage with his wife, he hasn't even consummated the marriage with his wife, and here he is acting as a midwife. Here he is, the one that's trying to figure out how to deliver a baby, and no one else is around them because there's no room in the inn. Don't let this just blow right by you. These people are living in an occupied nation, foreign occupied nation, government tyranny, government oppression, telling them to go get registered, and they're complying with that registration. They're complying with that edict despite them being pregnant, despite them not having sex. And now here a virgin bride is going to be giving birth in a place with poop and just bleeding of sheep, and just it's not conducive to, it's not sterile, it's not clean, it's not perfect, it's not how you would imagine it. It's just in this gunky place. And you can imagine, if you've ever been in the room when someone gives birth, like they're screaming and pushing and just crying. It's just, this is not, folks, this is not a good scene. This is not a good scene. But this is what was happening. This was her battle. This was the betrothed wife. This is a virgin battling through childbirth. I don't know who else is with them, but if Joseph is the head of the home, then it's probably just him and Mary. It's probably just them in a manger with a bunch of barn animals. But she wrapped him in a swaddling clothes. Her instincts kicked in. And despite all of this, she's automatically caring for her son. She's automatically caring for the Messiah. And you notice, in all of this, God said this is how it's going to happen. That Jesus did come from Bethlehem, just like Micah 5:2 said he would. Just like Micah 5:2 said he would. He did come through this. And this is despite the fact that there's this strong nation, there's strong opposition force that seems to be in charge of the entire world, so that the entire world goes to everyone to their own city. Now, if Caesar Augustus is giving this decree from Rome, and this decree is being obeyed by Jews in Judea and Israel, don't you think this isn't being obeyed in Egypt? Don't you think that this decree isn't being obeyed in Ethiopia? Don't you think that this decree isn't being obeyed in modern-day Turkey or Greece or Morocco or Libya? The entire world that the Pax Romana, Caesar, was in charge of is obeying this decree from Rome. So you've got literally the entire world reshuffling the deck back to where, quote, they belong. And as this is happening, so you can imagine just all the travel. You see those flight lines or the flight paths of all those planes just kind of flying all over the place. Through all of this travel, all this hustle and bustle, God infiltrates his creation as a little baby to be wrapped up in swaddling clothes. And she lays him in a little baby manger crib thing for an animal. She probably had to put straw on top of it because there was probably poop or something. It probably smelled bad because there was no room for them in the inn. Free market capitalism couldn't provide them the opportunity to provide for an inn because there was no room. And through all of this, God infiltrated. He invaded his creation as a little baby in this context. Amazing. Next time we'll pick up Luke chapter 2, verse 8. God bless you.